In the capitalist world, we're all addicted to something. It doesn't have to be a substance, it can be anything. Scrolling on your phone is an addiction. Controlling how other people perceive you or controlling oneself is an addiction as well. When you think that you're better than others because you have such great self-control, that's a type of an addiction too, because then you become so preoccupied with observing your own patterns of behavior and micro-controlling them that you too become just like any addict. Addiction is that desire to have freedom and control over one's life that has just been exaggerated because of the unfavorable circumstances. And of course, I'm going to keep on saying the same thing. We need to change the economic conditions, the circumstances that we all live in order to observe any kind of a personal change. That doesn't mean that we cannot change little things here and there, but most of these things are going to be either substituted with something else, or it's going to just be such a hard process to continuously engage in that we sooner rather than later may engage in the harmful activity again, even if it's not directly harmful. Like, for example, I have a shopping addiction. It's not too harmful to me because I can go thrift shopping and I can buy really cheap things, and it doesn't really have that much of an impact on a lot of people. However, I recognize that it has a profound effect on my life and my perception of myself as a human because of the shame that is associated with it, because I want to be a thoughtful consumer. I don't want to fill my house with things that I'm not using to their full capacity. I know that there are plenty of people who would benefit from having that thing that is just lying around my house. But this shame, it's not constructive because it doesn't help you change your behavior. The only message that it has is that you're a bad person. And this goes hand in hand with Christian ideology, because Christian ideology loves exploiting shame. And I think a long time ago, I made that video about guilt and shame just not being pragmatic, just not being very useful. Like, if they worked, then we would probably have a slightly different ideology. But of course, the ideology is always going to follow the material conditions. The ideology is going to be formed by the way we live our lives, by the way we produce and distribute the essential goods. And of course, because human production has such a long history, both of these things are so deeply intertwined, it may be hard to establish whatever came first. And it doesn't really matter. What matters though is when you change your conditions, even slightly so, you notice a change in the patterns of your behavior that may happen. And sometimes it may take time, and depending on the severity of your habit, you will also need some willpower in many cases. However, it is nearly impossible, I would say, to completely rid oneself of addictive behavior just because our nervous systems are not well equipped to handle so much stress. If we have a lot of stress at work, if we have domestic chores, if we have all of these little things to attend to, even if we have a relatively safe and nice and easy life, we're still bombarded with so much information. We are overstimulated, and ultimately we feel either depressed or anxious or both because of our lack of a connection to other people in our immediate environment. And we feel this profound loneliness, which usually comes from alienation. And we cannot get rid of alienation in the capitalist world, because alienation is a part of the problem of commodification. And we, as people, commodities whose labor became a commodity, we are bound to feel alienated, not only from the products of our labor, but from ourselves and our fellow humans. So under capitalism, this kind of suffering is inevitable. Is it going to change when we start building socialism and communism? Yes. It is going to change, and hence this is why I keep talking about the USSR, because my ancestors, who were very poor and their destinies would be quite miserable otherwise, they were able to enjoy a quantitative change in their lifetime. They received opportunities to not only change the overall pattern of their behavior, but they had a chance to change their entire destiny, the entire destiny of the genus from which they came. And if I was not in a direct communication with these people, and if I haven't met a ton of other people with very similar experiences, I would probably not even believe it, because it sounds like, oh, it happened too fast. But of course, there were downsides to this as well. Psychologically, it was very hard for some of my ancestors to move from the village to a town. and it was not easy for them to adapt to a lot of information and being able to, professionally perform at a certain level. It was not easy. They still struggled with maintaining a certain status, a certain appearance, a certain vibe, whatever, but at least their efforts paid off, and at least they felt like they were a part of this bigger whole. They felt like they had that goal, that common goal for the benefit of everyone, and they did. They helped people in their immediate surroundings. They were able to see improvements everywhere, pretty much. This is why I keep advocating for people to study history from a dialectical perspective, because when you look at history from a dialectical perspective, you see it as the struggle and unity of the opposites. It's not a streamlined linear process. It's not going to be just better and better and better and more progress and more progress. It is going to be that contradiction resolving itself, but the contradiction is never fully going to be resolved. For humans, for example, the ultimate resolution of a contradiction is death. But for all of the rest of the world, the contradiction is ongoing because it's a process. It is never going to be resolved, at least not to our perception, not to our limited human perception. We're not capable of understanding and perceiving the ultimate resolution of a contradiction, and I don't think it exists from a dialectical standpoint. But being an active participant in that struggle and unity in resolving of these social contradictions, we have so much more agency and autonomy, and we become fully, truly human when we participate in a process like this. And nowadays, we don't feel human at all, don't we? We feel like cogs in the machine. We feel like we are nobodies. And if we die, only a few people who are in our immediate surroundings, like our friends and family, only they are going to care. But we are going to be ultimately wiped down from the history of humankind, and no one will ever remember us. And there is a profound loneliness in that. Okay, so this was just another rant. I don't even know what my point was. Of course, my point is always study history, study dialectical materialism, look at all the commie books, read Lenin, read Marx, read Engels, and I hope you have a great day today, and I'll talk to you sometime later.